Sit down, boy. 2 words. 5 seconds. A moment that made millions of Americans drop everything and stare at their screens. On what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday night in Manhattan, a political talk show turned into something unforgettable. It wasn't scandal, it wasn't a gaffe, it wasn't the usual shouting match. It was a clash between arrogance and dignity, an exchange that revealed how power, pain, and history can collide on a brightly lit stage. The setup: a familiar show, an unfamiliar collision. The scene looked like any other primetime debate: glaring studio lights, polished cameras, and a buzzing audience waiting for sharp lines and viral sound bites. The format was predictable: politicians sparring, commentators interrupting, hosts trying to hold it all together. At the center sat two very different figures. On one side, Caroline Leavitt, a rising political firebrand, well known for her biting comebacks and her knack for stealing the spotlight. She thrives on confrontation, eager to deliver lines that will trend before the commercial break. Across from her, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso. Reserved, deliberate, almost understated. His mission wasn't to argue, it was to share his country's story, to explain its struggles and aspirations, and to highlight West Africa's pursuit of independence from foreign entanglements. Every word he spoke carried weight, but none were designed for theatrics. The breaking point. For a while, the conversation was civil. They spoke of colonial history, economic ties, and Africa's future role in global politics. Traoré's voice remained calm, his tone respectful. He didn't accuse, he didn't provoke. He simply told the truth as he saw it. And then it happened. Caroline leaned forward, eyes narrowed, finger pointed. With a sharpness that cut through the room, she hurled 2 words across the stage. Sit down, boy. The insult wasn't just dismissive. It carried centuries of weight. It wasn't merely a political jab. It echoed old hierarchies, old wounds, the language of belittlement. The studio went still. The host froze. Viewers at home gasped. Some leaned closer to their screens, bracing for a fiery backlash. This was the moment Caroline had engineered, the provocation that would make her shine. The response that changed everything. But what came next wasn't rage, and it wasn't retreat. It was something altogether unexpected. Captain Traoré did not raise his voice. He did not trade insult for insult. Instead, he answered with a calm that carried more power than anger ever could. His reply wasn't rehearsed, and it wasn't defensive. It was personal, truthful, and unshakably dignified. That was the moment the debate stopped being just another show. It became a mirror, forcing viewers, families, classrooms, and communities to confront more than just foreign policy. It became a story about what it means to carry history on your shoulders and still rise above the weight of disrespect. This wasn't just politics, it was something bigger. And for a few seconds, the nation watched, not with noise or laughter, but with silence. It's not about sainthood, it's about humanity. Those were the words that ended the most unforgettable exchange of the night. But the power of that sentence came not from rhetoric, not from theater. It came from everything that had unfolded in the moments before. Grace under fire. When Caroline Leavitt spat out her insult, millions expected Captain Ibrahim Traoré to react with fury or indignation. Instead, he did the opposite. He didn't raise his voice, didn't even shift in his seat. He looked at her with a calmness so deep it seemed unshakable, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from media coaching, but from living through real loss and carrying the memory of generations past. And then, slowly he rose, not to protest, not to defy, but to stand in dignity. His silence spoke louder than anger ever could. The studio audience leaned forward. Cameras instinctively zoomed closer. Everyone sensed it. This was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. A voice that spoke beyond the stage. I come from a place, Traoré began, his voice soft but steady, where boys are forced to become men before they even learn how to dream. The words fell heavy. Caroline shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Her usual smirk faltered. Because Traoré was no longer speaking to her, he was speaking to everyone. "You can call me boy on your stage," he continued, locking eyes with her. "But where I come from, boys carry nations on their backs. They fight so others don't starve. They lead because no one else will." His words filled the room with a quiet weight. A woman in the front row wiped tears from her cheeks. Viewers at home leaned closer, stunned into silence. Memory and truth. Then Traoré revealed the story that silenced even the skeptics. "I buried my father under open sky," he said. "There were no speeches, no flags, just dirt, silence, and my mother's grief." The air in the studio changed. One audience member, an elderly black woman, bowed her head as tears traced lines of memory down her face. Caroline's composure cracked. She looked anywhere but at him. Traoré pressed on, not bitterly but with clarity. "He was killed during a coup funded by outsiders. So when you say sit down, boy, do you mean the boy who watched his village burn? The boy who studied by candlelight because electricity never returned after colonialism left? A soldier stands." And then something unexpected happened. From the panel, Colonel Jacob Whitmore, a decorated U.S. Army veteran, rose to his feet. With a hand pressed to his chest, he spoke with a voice that shook with emotion. "I've served in Liberia. I've seen what boys like him endure. Calling him boy, that wasn't debate. That was humiliation. And it dishonors every soldier I served beside in Africa." The room froze. Then the colonel extended his hand to Traoré. "Captain, thank you. Not just for defending your people, but for reminding us what leadership really looks like." They shook hands. The audience rose, not out of sympathy, but out of respect. For a moment, the studio was no longer a set. It was a courtroom, a classroom, a church, a place where truth could not be denied. "You will not erase me." As silence settled again, Traoré lowered his voice. "You don't have to like me," he said, looking directly into the camera. "But you will not erase me." The statement rippled across the room. At first, a single clap, then another. And soon the entire audience rose again. This time not for a performance, but for a person. For a truth that demanded to be heard. The collapse of a strategy. Caroline tried to recover. Her voice cracked as she sneered. "Oh, come on. Are we really pretending he's some kind of saint now?" But the timing, the tone, the cruelty, it all landed flat. The audience recoiled. Even the host leaned back, visibly unsettled. And then came Traoré's final words, steady as ever. "It's not about sainthood. It's about humanity." In that moment, he didn't just win an argument. He shifted the entire conversation. You made this moment. You just didn't expect it to speak back. With those words from the host, the debate ceased to be a show. It became something else entirely. A collective reckoning no one in the studio or at home would ever forget. A child's voice of truth. It began with a trembling voice from the front row. A young black girl rose to her feet, her words cutting through the silence. "No, you apologize. That wasn't a rebuttal. That was cruelty." The air froze. The shift was palpable. This was no longer a sparring match for headlines. It was an awakening. Caroline Levitt, suddenly exposed, looked to the host for rescue. None came. Across the stage, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat down again, his composure unshaken. His calm presence made one truth undeniable. For the first time that night, Caroline was no longer the loudest voice in the room. The difference between disagreement and disrespect. Caroline tried to claw back control, laughing nervously. "Come on, this is America. We're allowed to disagree." Traoré leaned forward, his voice quiet but unflinching. Disagreement is healthy, but disrespect kills the conversation. And if you kill the conversation, you kill understanding. The applause that followed was not explosive. It was slow, reverent, like a hymn. It wasn't for performance. It was for truth. The letter that changed the room. And then, when emotions seemed at their peak, Traoré reached into his jacket. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out a folded sheet of paper, edges worn from being read and reread. He held it with the care of someone carrying something sacred. "This," he said softly, "was written by my younger brother 2 days before he died in a protest." The room stilled. Nobody breathed. "He was protesting for food," Traoré continued, voice steady but heavy. "He died believing the world could still change." He unfolded the paper. The studio grew so silent that the rustle of the letter was deafening. "Big brother," it read. "If I die, promise me they won't forget why." Gasps rippled across the audience. Some wept openly, others bowed their heads. Holding the letter toward the light, Traoré declared, "So no, I will not sit down, because I carry the memory of those who were forced to kneel." Caroline's hands trembled. Her voice was gone. There was no witty retort left, only silence. A chain of reverence. Then something extraordinary happened. A white camera operator, who had been quietly filming from the side, put down his equipment. He walked to the stage, extended his hand, and said clearly, "Thank you for reminding me what honor looks like." The atmosphere shifted once more. The debate stage had transformed into something sacred. This was no longer about politics. It was about grief, about family, about the invisible burdens people carry. From the third row, a black woman stood, voice shaking with both pain and pride. "My son served in Afghanistan," she said. "He came back in a box. They called him boy, too, even in uniform. When you spoke, it felt like my son stood up again." No applause followed, only reverence. For once, silence was the purest form of respect. Even Caroline sat frozen, realizing she was no longer part of the story. What began as a confrontation had turned into transformation. The breaking point. But Caroline couldn't stay silent. Her face flushed, her words spilling out in a mix of defensiveness and desperation. "This is a setup. This isn't journalism, it's emotional theater." The host turned toward her, calm but deliberate. Slowly, he removed his earpiece, set it on the desk, and spoke. "Caroline, the cameras are rolling. You created this moment. You just didn't expect it to speak back. You stood taller than any man I've seen." That was the line, written on a folded piece of paper, that no one expected to hear from Caroline Levitt. But before her quiet admission came, the night itself had already carved its place in history. The walkout. When Caroline slammed her cue cards onto the desk and stormed off the set, heels striking the floor like gunshots, the room did not erupt. There was no applause, no jeering, only silence. Someone in the audience whispered what millions were thinking. She couldn't handle the truth. The cameras returned to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, still seated, still calm. "I didn't come here to shame her," he said softly. "I came here to tell the truth." Behind the scenes, chaos buzzed. Producers scrambled, phones lit up. Clips of the exchange were already spreading across the globe. Hashtags climbed to the top of trending lists. And then came a quiet message from the White House press team. "We saw everything. America has to listen." When the show resumed, the host asked one last question. "Captain Traoré, do you believe America can truly hear voices like yours?" He paused, then looked directly into the camera. "Yes, but first, America has to listen, especially when it's uncomfortable." Then, unexpectedly, he shared a story. He spoke of a hospital visit in Chicago, where an 8-year-old girl had drawn 2 flags side by side, Burkina Faso's and America's. On the studio screen, the image appeared, the 2 flags drawn in crayon, joined as one. "She told me you're both fighting for us," Traoré recalled. His voice dropped. That child understood more about unity than most grown leaders ever will. Tears welled across the audience. What began as an insult had transformed into a mirror, a reflection of who America was and who it could become. The child who spoke for a nation. Just before the sign-off, a producer handed the host a note. He read it aloud with raised brows. Captain Traoré, we have a surprise guest. The screen lit up. Gasps filled the studio. There she was, the little girl from Chicago, holding her crayon drawing of the two flags. "Hi, Captain," she said, beaming. "You remembered me." Hardened veterans wiped their eyes. Journalists lowered their cameras to weep quietly. "You said I was brave," she continued, her voice steady. "But tonight, you were the bravest." Traoré pressed his hand to his heart. His voice broke. "You give me strength. You are the future I fight for." The girl nodded, then delivered the line that would echo far beyond the studio. "Next time someone says, 'Sit down, boy,' I'll tell them to stand up like Captain Traoré." The feed ended. The audience didn't just clap. They rose in solemn silence. Dignity under fire. That night, back in his Washington hotel room, Traoré's phone buzzed with messages from world leaders, veterans, and families. But it was the letter slipped under his door that stilled him. It came from the National Civil Rights Museum. "Dear Captain Traoré, tonight you didn't just speak for yourself. You spoke for every soul ever told to sit down, boy. We are preparing a permanent exhibition titled Dignity Under Fire. We would be honored to feature your words, your story, and the moment that changed the world." He read it twice, then whispered, "Not for me, for all of them." An unlikely apology. 1 week later, Caroline Levitt returned to the same studio. This time there were no cameras, no audience. She left only a folded note for the producers to deliver. At a press event, Traoré read it aloud. "I said sit down, boy, and you stood taller than any man I've seen. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope our children grow up learning from your strength, not my ignorance." Traoré looked up from the page and spoke plainly. "We don't heal through silence. We heal through courage." And she just showed some. From that moment, he was no longer just Captain Traoré. He became known as the man who made America listen. The show returned to its regular programming, but one thing never changed. His chair remained at the center of the stage, empty, unmarked, but impossible to ignore. Everyone knew what it stood for.